see cities that are changing population demographics like that these days. And so it would be interesting to see, was there something like a famine or something within 100 years of when we're seeing this that pushed 20% of the population to be genetically different that just happened to have a shorter lifespan anyway, shorter anticipated lifespan, or, the fact that they were fleeing a famine and they had food insecurity and they passed that down to generations, and that may work itself out. I mean, those are all things that I think to us, because we're so used to having the internet and all of this information, seems like it would be really easy to find out, but I think probably that's just
not necessarily
almost impossible.
Yeah, it's difficult, but it could go. I mean, I realize I'm about to do what you just did earlier, which is I'm about to question my own theory, because it's been seen before, where when you get an influx of people who are genetically different, and let's say that they were fleeing an area where they always had a bit of a food scarcity, so from an epigenetic level, they were inclined to acquire more body fat, because that is the way you survive.
Right.
And suddenly to be put into this food-rich environment or over-rich environment, that could then push them into some other unhealthy spectrum. I mean,
I also don't know.
It's one of those things I throw my hands up because it's like, I'm damned if I do and I'm damned if I don't.
Yeah, I think that really the key to this is genetics. They need to just grab a bunch of these. I don't know how to call this.
Glaswegians.
Glaswegians. I don't know. So I'll just say people from Glasgow.
Yeah.
I think that
a sample size.
I think they need to start looking at their genes and seeing what makes, if they're actually different. Because I'm betting they are.
Yeah,
probably.
Yeah. I think they must be.
And it's probably, like I said, due to some migration or the plutonium processing facility.
Yeah, probably more that.
Things.
The Scottish Homer Simpson, or no, it's Cousin Willie. That's who it is.
He doesn't actually do any plutonium stuff. He took care of the school.
Yeah.
That's because he got out of Glasgow.
Yeah. Smart thinking, dude. Yeah.
Good point.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and give folks here, because that's really all we've got in our theories and our debating here. We've got some pertinent details, as always. We have our website, which is thinkingsidewayspodcast.com. You can find this episode, any past episode. We'll have some of our research links on there. And, of course, on the right-hand sidebar, we've got some other things on the website. There is the PayPal button. There is the link for merchandise and for Patreon. PayPal, one-time donation, which you can totally do. We appreciate that. That'd be really awesome. But it is, again, voluntary. We have shirts, coffee, cups, phone cases, merchandise like that available through Zazzle. There's a link to that on the website. And then Patreon is on there, patreon.com. So if you would like to give to the show on a recurring basis, that is available.
Phones ringing.
Yeah, phones ringing. If you want to go straight to, the link will take you to it, but it is patreon.com/thinkingsideways.
Strictly optional, and don't forget, when you pledge, you're not just giving us like $5. You're pledging like $5 an episode. So remember that.
It's on an episode basis.
Do remember that.
It is by episode, so just keep that in mind.
So when you pledge 50 cents, don't feel cheap. That's a lot of money in the long run.
If you pledge $50, well,
that might be a little bit more.
That'd be great, but just be careful.
Now, when you find us out on the wild world of the internet, you'll find us in a number of places, one of those being iTunes. If you're on iTunes and you use it, go ahead and leave us a comment and a rating and subscribe. We are, of course, on all of the streaming sites, so you can get us through there as well. We are on social media, so we're on Facebook. We've got the Facebook group and the Facebook page. And we're also on Twitter, which is Thinking Sideways without the G in the middle.
Yeah.
And we've also got subreddit, which is always fun and interesting.
You don't know. You've never been there.
Shush. I'm trying to make it act like I totally know how to use Reddit.
No.
I don't even know how to type the word.
Anything going on out there?
Reddit.
Yeah, it's like READ.
Yeah, there's a silent H in there.
I knew it. That's why I can't find it.
Yeah.
And of course, if you want to, you can always send us an email. Our email address is thinkingsidewayspodcast@gmail.com. So if you've got suggestions for stories, you've got feedback, anything like that, definitely feel free to send us an email. And I think that is all of those details. So anything else, you guys?
No.
Not a thing.
All right, well, that's it. Thanks, everybody, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Hey guys, Steve here. You are listening to one of our original 26 episodes. If you've listened to any of our new episodes, you're going to notice that we're sounding a little different in these ones.
Yeah, there's a reason for that.
There is.
They've been remastered.
They have been remastered.
Because they had a really annoying hum.
Yeah, I mean, a huge thanks to listener James for doing almost all of the legwork on this
Yes.
thing.
Yeah.
You'll also notice if you had listened to what we're calling the Lost 26 episodes before, and you're re-listening now, the music and sound effects are gone.
Yes, we've gone back to straight audio. So be warned, we sound a little different today than we do in what you're about to listen to.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Thinking sideways.
I don't understand.
Does not compute.
You never know.
Insufficient data to formulate a reply. What?
Stories of things we simply don't know the answer to.
Well, hey there. It's time for a little unsolved mystery action. You guys up for that? Woo! Woo! Okay, well, first off, my name's Joe.
I'm Devin.
I'm Steve.
Okay, well, let's get rolling here. So our story starts in the early 70s. There was a break-in at the Hughes Corporation. The break-in led to the revelation that a ship that had been built by the Hughes Corporation, the Glomar Explorer, which was ostensibly built for the exploration and mining of manganese nodules from the ocean floor, was not actually built for that purpose at all. It was actually part of a CIA project that the Hughes Corporation was providing cover for. So the Glomar Explorer was, it turns out, not mining manganese nodules at all. It was raising a Soviet submarine.
Wait, what's a manganese module?
I'm not even sure what the hell that is. But there are manganese nodules on the ocean floor, and manganese is a rare metal that's worth a lot of money, I guess. And so, if it weren't so darn expensive to go retrieve those things off the ocean floor, then we could actually be grabbing those things and, utilizing them. But apparently we're not, because it costs too much money.
Okay.
So anyway, as a little aside, the cover story was so effective that some major corporations actually put a lot of money into researching how to actually retrieve manganese nodules themselves from the ocean floor. And whoopsie, joke was on them. So anyway, back to so let's go back to 1968. In April 1968, the Soviet submarine K-129 sank in the Pacific, about 800 miles northwest of Hawaii. It was an early Soviet boomer, and I'm sure you all know what a boomer is, but for the few of you who don't know what a boomer is, that's a submarine that carries nuclear missiles. The idea being that, if somebody launches an attack on your homeland and wipes out all your land-based missiles, well, you still got some hidden out at sea to fire back at the enemy. We've got them. The Soviets have them. The Brits and the French have them. Chinese have them. So anyway, that's a boomer. So this was one of the earliest attempts at a boomer. It was a diesel submarine that had been lengthened. The sail had been made larger to accommodate 3 vertically mounted nuclear tipped missiles. They were liquid fuel, and that's probably why the submarine sank, is because liquid fuel rockets tend to be a lot more prone to accidents, which is why we use solid fuel rockets on our boomers. So anyway, so it sank. We didn't know about it at first. What happened is the Navy noticed a huge surge of Soviet naval forces into that part of the Pacific, obviously looking for their lost submarine. And so that caused us to go back and review our SOSUS records. And I'm sure you all know what SOSUS is. But SOSUS, but for the few of you who don't, SOSUS is...
Scratching my head.
Yeah, is an underwater network of sonar receivers that we've got in certain strategic places around the world. And so we actually pick up all kinds of noise and run it through computers and figure out what's going on in the ocean.
Oh, is that how we heard the bloop?
The bloop? Probably.
Oh, yeah, it's a giant listening network.
Yeah, it's a big underwater listening network.
We'll talk about the bloop later.
Yeah, okay, well, yeah, I remember the bloop. But so anyway, in response to this, the U.S. went back and reviewed all of its SOSUS records and determined that yes, indeed, there were some sounds. There was first of all a big boom associated with an explosion, and then somewhat after that, some other sounds associated with the implosion or the death of a submarine. So apparently they probably had a problem with one of their rockets. They surfaced, it exploded. They probably had a problem with one of their rockets. They surfaced, it exploded, and then eventually the ship wound up sinking in about 2 miles of water. And so using triangulation, etc., we were able to figure out roughly where it had gone down. So at that point, and by the way, the project was eventually named Project Azorian, although they codenamed it Project Jennifer. It was codenamed Project Azorian, but they told the press it was Project Jennifer because that's just the way they are, the government.
I really wanted there to be 27 of them.
Yeah, I know. Right? So everybody thinks everybody thought it was Project Jennifer, but actually it's Project Azorian. Yeah. There's and so, I mean, there's a guy who was part of the whole thing. He was on the Halibut, which was a spy sub that went out looking for the wreckage of the submarine. Eventually, many years later, like in the 90s, he wrote a book about it called Spy Sub. And in his book, the Halibut was called the Viperfish. Exactly. Everywhere it was, he couldn't, and everybody, the Soviets, Chinese, everybody knows it's called the Halibut. We all know this, but he was still required to call it something else, so he called it the Viperfish. That's how silly they are about this stuff.
Of course.
Yeah, I know. So the guy's name was Roger Dunham, and he was on board the Halibut, and the Halibut was equipped to trail an apparatus behind it, which they called the fish. And the fish was basically, remember, this is in like the early 70s. We didn't have digital photography and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So what they had to do is they had to trail this thing underneath the sub and behind the sub and do racetrack patterns, just go up and down in a grid pattern over the ocean floor, and then regularly haul the thing up back into the boat, pull out the film canisters, and develop the film.
Oh my God.
And so eventually the day came, and they were down there for weeks looking around, and eventually the day came when, hey, spotted something. And so they had pictures of something on the ocean floor, the K-129. So they had found what they were looking for. And so at that point, that's when it's time to figure out what to do with it. It was laying on its side. One of the missiles had slid out of the top of the sail. And there was this thought got around that we should probably try to raise it. And so the Glomar Explorer was built for that express purpose of raising that submarine to explore their missile technology, maybe get a look at the code books, whatever else is going on. And so the Glomar Explorer was purpose-built for this very mission. It had this thing called the Claw that was, and it had a moon pool in the middle of the ship. The moon pool was just a big pool that was open on the bottom. It had closing doors that could close, but it could open up, and it was 199 feet long. And then at either end of that, there were these crane-type arrangements. What essentially they did was they would lower down these big steel pipes, slowly lower them down. And these other big machinery pieces that would grab the next piece. These were, I believe, 60 feet long piece. And they were threaded on either end. And so you would lower this thing down all the way, these two pieces of steel that are attached to the claw, and then the cranes bring up two more big, huge tubes of steel, and they're threaded into the ones below.
Like making a tent.
Yeah. And then those things are slowly lowered, and then the next pair of tubes are brought up, threaded in, slowly lowered. So the process of actually getting the claw down to the K-120, and bringing it back up took many days. And so it was revealed many years after the fact that what had happened, the claw had 5 claws to it, essentially. It was like there were 5 individual claws that could grasp the submarine and then bring it back up. And so unfortunately, they had an unfortunate incident, according to what the Navy said. They went down too fast. They slammed the claw into the ocean bottom.
Nope.
And then they managed to maneuver it over to the submarine. I don't know if I mentioned the claw actually had like propellers and stuff on it, so that they could actually, because they were such a long ways away, there was nothing they could do from their end as far as like pushing on the pipes or anything to guide this thing. So they had to, basically using underwater cameras and lights and everything like that, they would use propellers that were mounted on this thing to pull it in various directions to get it centered over where they needed it to be. And they get it centered over the wreckage, and then they when they hooked the wreckage with the claw.
Yeah, no, this sounds this makes me think of, have you ever taken a tape measure and run it out to about 6 foot and it's trying to bend and not quite break and you're trying to get it over to a tape measure?
Oh yeah.
This was 2 miles down?
Yeah, a couple of miles down, and it was a long ways down. It was like a very difficult operation, and yet somehow,
Tedious, I think, is the word that comes to mind.
that too, and yet somehow they, alas, on the way up, some of the claws broke and the part of the submarine fell. Apparently,
so they actually managed to hook it.
Yeah, they actually managed to get this thing wrapped around the sub. The claw was really like holding onto the sub, bringing it up. And unfortunately, some of the claws broke on the way back up under the stress, and most of the submarine was lost. And essentially, the nose remained, and the rest of it broke away.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that is the official story. But of course, there's a lot of problems with that story.
Did they get the nose? They bring it up? They keep bringing it up?
They did bring the nose up. They brought the nose up. They actually found the remains of some Soviet sailors, and they gave them a burial at sea, supposedly.
Wait, didn't they already have one of those?
Yeah, they did. That's a good point.
Yeah, I feel like.
Yeah. And they didn't find much of value.
But his pupils are giant, too.
Okay. There's several problems with this story.
Okay.
The K-129 was 328 feet long.
The sub that they were retrieving.
Yeah, 328 feet long.
328 feet.
328 feet long. The moon pool of the Glomar Explorer was 199 feet long.
Huh.
Now, given that it was purpose-built for the mission of raising a submarine that's 129 feet longer than the moon pool, you kind of got to ask, exactly why they didn't make it a longer moon pool. But when questioned about that, a Navy spokesman said that the plan was to haul it up and then have divers go down and cut the ends of the submarine off, because they were mainly interested in the middle part where the missiles were.
They were just going to cut it off?
But that's more than half of the sub, isn't it? They would have to cut
about
off.
half.
About half?
Almost half. 328 feet, they would have had to cut it down, I'm assuming, to no more than 190 feet. They'd have a little bit of play, right? 195 at the most. Yeah, so they're losing a lot of sub there.
Well, and it's a sub. It's not as if it's just a shell and you cut the outside shell and it falls apart.
Exactly. The process of cutting the ends off is, you're talking weeks.
At least.
Many weeks because there's framing, there's decks, there's all kinds of, there's piping and tubing and all kinds of stuff.
That's the sort of thing they do for, months on a dry dock on a ship.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine doing that underwater and, especially,
at sea.
At sea with waves and everything. The next problem is that somehow the nose remained. Somehow the nose remained in the claws, and the rest of the sub broke away. But it seems rather unlikely that even if there was damage to the sub, and I'm sure there was, and it wouldn't be so extensive that the nose wouldn't have been pulled out with the rest of the wreckage out of the claws. It seems rather unlikely. And last of all, how did they get the nose into the moon pool? Because theoretically, the nose should have been sticking way out one end of the claws if it stayed behind. So how exactly did they get that nose into the moon pool?
And there's no reclose that says, quote unquote, this is what we did, correct?
How do you mean? There's no...
As in, this is how we got the nose in the moon.
Oh, yeah. No, they never explained that, no.
Okay.
It's never been explained.
I'm just thinking, okay, well, let's just run with the theory. Let's just run with the story.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we pull it up and a big chunk of it breaks away. Oh, crud. The only part that we've got left is what we meant to cut off, and it won't fit in the hole.
Yeah.
Well, it's like trying to get something in your car that's too big. You got to tie it on to something and cinch it down, and I can just imagine... they would have gone in with some kind of cabling and attached the superstructure, let go with the claw, and it would have drifted down, and then they would have craned it up through the moon pool.
That is entirely possible. They could have done something like that. They could have, I don't know if they had anything on board that was capable of hauling that much weight besides the claw itself. Mm-hmm. But they could have actually attached cables, dropped it, let it be suspended, bring the claw back down, and grab it, bring it back up. So that's entirely possible if that's what they did.
I mean, that's. I'm just thinking. Okay, well, let's just say the story is true. The cover story that is the cover story for the first story. Let's just say that's true. That's the only plausible way I could see